Elon Musk's grandfather, called Haldeman, he was pushing something called the Technate, a area that goes from Venezuela, Panama, and Mexico up through the United States, through Canada, and Greenland.
Venezuela is on high alert this morning.
Targeting Venezuela.
Send U.S. troops into Mexico.
Moving troops into Mexico. Saying we want Canada to be the 51st state.
We've been dealing with Greenland, and we have to do it.
It's the Technate unfolding, and these Technates under a world government, which again would be appointed, not elected. That's why they're putting so many moronic politicians into power. They're trying to undermine public support for elected politicians. To put this thing together in a much more expanded way, you can go back to Elon Musk's grandfather, a guy called Haldeman, who was operating in Canada, and he was pushing something called technocracy. The Technate, they called it. The Technate, technocracy, is a form of government which they want globally, in which no longer do you have elected politicians. That's why they're putting so many moronic politicians into power, because they're trying to undermine public support for elected politicians. You look at the UK cabinet, there's not a brain cell to rub together, not two brain cells to rub together there in the cabinet of the UK, including the Prime Minister, Starmer. You look at the cabinet and the government of Trump in the United States, same. I'm sure you'll find, you look all over Europe, you'll find the same too. So the idea is that you have a government of appointees, of technocrats, of bureaucrats, of people running health systems, etc., appointed people. And the Technate that Elon Musk's grandfather wanted and was supported by people in the United States, and the technocracy movement in the 1930s supported Adolf Hitler, by the way, they were planning a Technate area that went from where? You can see the maps, the old maps from the 1930s, that goes from Venezuela in South America all the way through Central America, including Panama and Mexico, up through the United States, up through Canada, and guess where it ends in the north? Greenland. And when you look at targeting Venezuela, moving troops into Mexico, saying we want Canada to be the 51st state, which he never mentioned in the election campaign, and suddenly he comes to office and he's all over it, and why they want to include Greenland as an American territory is it's the Technate unfolding. And these Technates are designed to have their like all over the world under a world government, which again would be appointed, not elected. So when you've been doing it as long as I have, 36 years now, these things all fit. But if you're new to it, it's bewildering. And I understand why. It was bewildering to me in 1990. You don't see how the things fit. And therefore, I've just finished a new book, which is designed specifically to put these elements together and show how it all fits together. Because I see people, genuine people, who are opposing this, but supporting that. When that and this are both part of the same conspiracy for global dystopia.
I also had some David Icke thinking about something specific that I think, how can they introduce a digital ID or a chip? And here's my hypothesis. There will be so much AI and fake images and fake videos that will be very hard to prove if it's real or not. And the reason how to prove that you didn't do it is if you have a digital footprint or you have a biometric signing, that's not me. So they got to introduce it in a way that you will be forced to take it under the sign of security. Your data can be hacked. It's for your safety. And that's so hard to explain to normal people because they'll think, yeah, we should be protected. We should be safe. We should be protected. And then you try to explain it. And then they say, oh, yeah, you're a conspiracy thinker or that's thinking a bit too far. What do you think of this theory that there will be more and more fake images and that you will have to prove that you didn't do something? Because these days, often, sometimes it seems that you're guilty until proven innocent. And with this digital footprint, you have some proof like, I didn't do it. I wasn't there. This image is not me, or this footage is not from me.
I think you're spot on, mate. That's one element of it. There are many others. And look at it now. We keep coming back to Elon Musk. Go and look at his page on Twitter X with all its millions and millions of views for every post. And you'll see him pushing this AI system he calls Grok. And what he's pushing is how you can basically fake anything. And so what is real anymore? You can go on to X and you can see posts, and they seem to be showing a picture of A, B, or C. And it turns out they're AI generated and not what they appear to be. And the more that AI moves on, and it's moving on so fast for reasons that not just invention either, the more you will not be able to tell the difference between, quote, real and not real. And yeah, what you're talking about is a technique that I dubbed back in the 1990s problem reaction solution. You create the problem, you get the reaction from the public, do something about the problem, and then you offer the solution to the problems you have covertly created, but the public demanding an answer to the problem don't know that. And problem reaction solution is used all the time. And there's another version of it I call no problem reaction solution, which is when you don't need a real problem, you just need the illusion of it, i.e., human caused climate change. And from that illusory problem, just a perceptual problem, you can offer solutions that are not necessary that transform society. We're now having, for instance, in Canada, in effect, environmental climate lockdowns, where people are denied from going to great vast areas with big fines if they do, in the very same way that we experienced. And this whole idea of a climate lockdown policy was predicted a long time ago, that this was part of the plan. Yeah, absolutely. There's a very good chance that will be part of the way that they do it, because they need your perception. And because there are 8 billion people in the world, so we're told, and the number of people in full knowledge who are doing this is tiny by comparison, they have to have your perception so you will behave the way that suits them. So they're not going to tell you that we're doing this because we're creating a global dystopia, which yourself, if you're young enough, and you've got to be quite old not to be included, but certainly your children and grandchildren will absolutely hit the eye of the storm of it, under a system of total control of everything you do, even down to what you think via this AI human fusion.
This is, you hit a crucial point for me, because I'm going to share from the heart what I think about the future. If you want to think about the future, you want to see and take a look at the mindset of young people and children. And I got to be honest with you, like on my channel, very few people under 40, let alone 30. When you had these gatherings, there were very few young people. You have them gathering and talking about Gaza, but maybe I'm wrong. I'm curious about your perspective. But this mobilization of the hidden agenda, it doesn't seem to hit the young people, according to me. They're addicted to technology. They're busy with other things, short attention span. So I'm a bit pessimistic about the future when I look at the mobilization mindset and consciousness of the young people and the children these days. What's your take on that?
I don't know. You've probably noticed that one of the big targets of this conspiracy is older people. I was born in 1952, and therefore I was born into a very different world to this one. It was still a controlled world, but not even beginning to be on the scale that it is now. And because I was born into that world, I've been able to observe how the world has changed. And they say there's no fool like an old fool, and that's true. Because if you have lived a long life and learned nothing, then that's pretty bloody foolish. But lots of older people have learned something, and they can see the change that's taken place. And now they're being more and more marginalized and more targeted. They were massively targeted by the COVID fake vaccine, for instance, and other means during COVID. The young are born into the world as it is. And I've just seen a study which came out in the last few days where they're looking at the effect of smartphones on the population. And what they found is fundamental changes in young people who are addicted to these phones, which is an enormous number, in terms of their brain activity and the way it processes information, how their personality changes have taken place as a result of this period since smartphones came in. And it's been my contention since way back that there are frequencies, electromagnetic frequencies coming off those phones that are designed to impact on brain function. And what the same study has found is that older people who are not addicted to phones, because lots of them are, but those that are not addicted to phones, even don't have them, they're unchanged in terms of the way their brain processes information. And so when you come into the world, you tend to think that this is how it is. This is normal to you because you know nothing else. And so when you're a young person that's been born into this technological society, which is expanding all the time, getting more extreme, then this is your normal. Whereas to older people, it's not, because they've got a radar to see that it's changed dramatically. So what they want is to target the younger people with all this stuff, everyone really, but specifically the young, because they're going to be the adults when this stuff comes in full blown. And more, the older generations will die off, and with it will go the memory of what it was like before, thus understanding the scale of change and control that's taken place.
I feel that's also, by the way, a bit the same thing with my grandma. She lived through World War II. She could tell those experiences. She experienced totalitarianism, some people fascism, other people communism. But then 2 generations, like those lived stories, die. And then there's another soil to do it again, because those stories are not being passed on of what happened in the past and what life looked like.
There's that old saying, if you don't remember history, then you are destined to repeat it. And so the idea is to put history down the memory hole in terms of people that directly experienced it, so that you can rewrite history and tell a completely different story of what actually happened and how people were affected. But I'll give you a simple story to give you an example of what I'm saying about targeting the young. What's happening to them is from the schools onwards, parents onwards in many cases, but from definitely the school onwards, they are being prepared perceptually to live in this dystopian society and to think it's normal. So there's a school on the Isle of Wight, just off the south coast of England, where my children went to, Kerry and Gareth and Jamie. And when they went to it, everything was open. You walked in the school and that was it. Now, if you go to that same school, it's like a prison camp. There's big high fences all around it. And when you go in, it's like a prison. I don't know if anyone's ever been to in a prison, or you can go to these wildlife parks and go into the lions area, and it's the same, whereby you go in and then there's another gate, a lock gate, which you have to get permission to go through and so it goes on to get in the school. And so any child that's going to that school, and it's the same all over the country, you'll know what it's like in your country, but those children will have that normalized. It's a normalization of dystopia and control. And if you take on board why that's being done as a child, then that's adding to your fear of everything, your fear of what might happen, your anxiety of what might happen, because the school is basically a protection zone for you. Now, there's no way that things have changed so utterly dramatically in the period of Jamie is what, 30, early 30s, and he went to that school when it was so different.
That's a bit like the overprotective mother. I grew up in the 90s. You know what I liked? Roaming free, without my phone, taking risk. I loved that risk. That's how I took responsibility. And yes, sometimes it can go wrong, but not being like helicopter parented, texted all the time, follow up all the time. That was such a liberation to discover myself. And I developed independence. And that is something that is completely missing these days. Also, the addiction to comfort. I really love that freedom that I had in the 90s. But you're even earlier. My dad and my mom are from the 60s. That was a kind of freedom with maybe less options. But you were a more mature human being, because if you're watched all the time, if you have to ask permission, that is not something that a mature human being has to do. That is something that an infant has to do.
Yeah, exactly. And I came across a document long time ago now, which was apparently found in a copier in 1986. And it was called Silent Weapons for a Quiet War. And this document was a manual on how to mass perceptually mind control the population. And it was very detailed. I include it in some of my books. And I've always remembered a line in it. If you treat people like 12-year-olds, they will start acting like them. And that's what we're seeing more and more. When I was a kid in the 50s, my instructions from my mother were to, when I went out the door about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, when it wasn't a school day, was to be back when the street lights came on. And I was away, just ad-libbing life, making my own fun with my mates, etc. And now it's the attention, which was then an expanded attention of possibility, is now that, the scrolling generations. And it's been systematic. It's done on purpose. What is that except a stepping stone to full-blown AI human fusion? That's what it is. They first of all give you something you hold. Then they move to something that's on the body. They want to get in the body, but something that's on the body. So you've got your Apple Watches and all your stuff, paraphernalia people put on their bodies linked to the internet and the Wi-Fi. And then they go in the body. And the biggest point where they went in the body was at what they're seeing under an electron microscope in the blood of people. They're self-replicating nano systems. They are under the control of some sort of program, in the sense that they are building systems in the body. And some won't be able to make that transition, and they'll die of various things or have real serious ailments. and then others will get transformed into something else. And that microchipping, see, people like Elon Musk, they're not giving you the cutting edge, but they're selling you the concept. So the real cutting edge can go on unseen. So Neuralink, his brain chip company, wants to put quite a size brain chip in the brain and have wires coming out and connected to something behind the ear. That's the Stone Age. It might seem like cutting edge to many people who get their information from the mainstream media, but it's the Stone Age. And I remember he was doing an interview, Musk, and the interviewer asked a very relevant question. He said, "But Mr. Musk, how many people are going to want a bit of their brain skull or a bit of their skull taken away to put one of your chips in their brain? How many people are going to do that?" And his answer was, "We won't necessarily have to do that because you can go in to the brain through the veins. And all you've got to do is trick the brain to allow, through the blood-brain barrier, this stuff to get in the brain, and it rewires the way the brain processes information." And that's what's been happening with people. And the Neuralink story is it's a diversion, but it is selling a concept, the concept of human technology fusion.
The last question that I have, it's another topic, but I'm very curious about your theory about it. We've been seeing problems with Muslim immigrants in Western Europe and certain cities, London, Brussels, Paris. What do you see about problems with Muslim immigrants? Because I did some research, and again, AI said it's fake, that Albert Pike was talking about the World War III and that it was going to be against the Muslims. What is your view of everything that's happening with the Muslims, stab attacks, grooming gangs? Is there a link with the underlying agenda? Because what's going on there, according to you?
Well, what they want is a civil war in these various countries, which will allow them to impose their fascist tyranny to stop the war, stop the civil war. And the more extreme stories appear in the newspapers and online about Muslim migrants and what they do, some of them do, the better for the cult, because it makes the population furious and angry and frustrated about what they see as their culture being overridden and taken over. Now, I remember as a kid when I first heard about the British Empire and the other European empires too, and how they went into these countries all over the world and took them over and imposed their version of everything on the population. And I was appalled that anyone could do that. And in reverse now, we're seeing the same thing happening. We're seeing in cities across Europe and the United States, but Europe's a massive example, and Britain, of another culture taking over from the indigenous culture, or as indigenous as you want to go back anyway. And the question is why? And you can't get away, when you research this, from Israel. Not Jewish people in general, although they are some of the most programmed people from cradle to grave you'll ever meet, because of the way that they are programmed to believe what their leaders, who don't have their best interests at heart, by the way, want them to believe. But what you are looking at, and if you do any research, you can uncover this. There are elements coming out of Israel, your Mossads and etc., that are behind this massive influx of migrants from the Middle East and elsewhere too into Europe. and through the southern border into America for a long time. And so why? You really have to get into the mindset of some of these people. They are utterly insane. And I'm not using that as a metaphor, I'm using it literally. They believe, the most extreme of them, in this ludicrous, and I can show that it's ludicrous, Old Testament story of the emergence of the Jewish people and ancient Israel. And part of that is that they say that there have been 2 temples in Jerusalem, and the Messiah, it's not Jesus, it's the Jewish Messiah, will return only when certain things happen. They talk about the 3rd temple on Temple Mount in Jerusalem, and where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is now and has been for so long. And if you'd have said not that long ago that the plan is to demolish the mosque and replace it with a 3rd Solomon's, quote, temple, then people will have said, you are mad, mate. It would be a bloodbath. But now look at it. Gaza is destroyed. The people of Gaza, the Palestinians of Gaza, are in a desperate state. The West Bank, the other area of Palestinians, is being basically deleted in terms of Palestinian occupation and replaced by Jewish settlers supported by the United States and Trump. And the IDF is now in control. So suddenly, demolishing the mosque and putting another one, a new Solomon's temple in its place, becomes less crazy as a suggestion than it would have been before. And these people are so crazy and so welded to these ludicrous ancient stories that have no basis in reality, that they believe that before the temple can be built, they have to sacrifice red heifers that have never had a yoke on their back, etc., and never given birth, and loads of other criteria. And they have to sacrifice one of those and mix it with certain things, and then that has to happen before the temple can be returned and the Messiah come. They've imported red heifers from Texas to Israel, and they've just sacrificed one. It had 2 black hairs on its back, which meant that it wasn't appropriate for the real ceremony, so they had to practice one relatively recently to play that out. And crucially, what they say must happen before the Messiah can come is that Edom must be destroyed. And Edom is the West. It is Europe. It is the United States and Canada, etc. And you listen to these stunningly extremist rabbis who are saying that Edom must be destroyed and that Islam is their means to do it. And then you start looking at people like George Soros of the Open Society Foundations and his son, who have put billions of dollars, billions, tens of billions of dollars into this Open Society Foundation. Open society equals open borders, to fund this surge of movement from the Middle East and other countries into Europe. And if you then look at how it started, it really got underway because of wars instigated by the United States and Britain, Tony Blair, in Iraq, in Libya, through another British Prime Minister, David Cameron, and Barack Obama, and other countries. And they knew that when they create war and devastation, and they've absolutely devastated Libya, they're now having slave markets in the towns. You're not going to go south looking for a new life. You're going to go north into Europe, which is what they did. And as a result of that massive movement of people, initially to get away from the conflict, which had been manufactured, weapons of mass destruction in Iraq, yeah, that turned out to be true, didn't it? Other people from other countries have gone on the back of that and have moved in enormous numbers into Europe. Now, more and more are coming across the channel into Britain, which is creating a lot of tension and fury in the UK. And the idea is that the indigenous population, which includes many former migrants and migrant families that were born here, is designed to be in a civil war on the basis of cultural conflict. Because the migrants are not, and I say the migrants, I'm talking about the extreme ones, not rank and file people who just want a better life. But the migrants in that criteria have no interest in assimilating into the population and respecting the indigenous culture. They want to impose their own. And this is the really key thing that has to be addressed and understood. Because boats, dinghies, are coming from France to Britain, and it's systematic, it's been exposed how the dinghies that are being used by people traffickers, when they arrive on the east coast of Britain, they're being put on trucks and taken back to France so they can be used again by the government. And how these pristine life jackets are being worn by the migrants coming over. Why would a people trafficker group be interested in the safety of migrants? As long as they've got their money, it's over. Couldn't care less what happens after that, they'd say. But they have these pristine new life jackets, and they're taken back so they can be used again. And the government, at the same time, is saying, oh, no, we must stop the people traffickers. You are the people traffickers. And what is also happening is the French Navy this has been proved with the leaking of communications between the two. The French Navy is escorting these dinghies into the area of the British Border Police, and the British Border Police are taking over and helping them get into to the east coast of Britain. It's all systematic. And this is the key point, because you can see the people in the dinghies very clearly that they're not. Overwhelmingly, they are not families, mothers and children fleeing war. They're coming from France. They are military-aged young men. And they're coming into this country, as they're gone into Europe, in fantastic numbers. Now, that's not a coincidence that all these military-age young men are being infused into British society. They're being given enormous benefits from the government that the indigenous population don't get and can't get. And it's all encouraging the flow to get bigger and bigger, and it's leading somewhere. And when you then go to these extreme rabbis in Israel who are saying we're using Islam to destroy Edom, the West, which has to be destroyed before the Messiah can come, then you start to get a kind of idea of how this fits together. And there are rabbis in Israel who have said that Donald Trump will go down eternally for serving the interests of this by destroying America, which is what he's doing. Everything that America claimed to once stand for, he's dismantling, not least with these tariffs, which are not paid by the exporting country, they're paid by the importer in the United States that then has to pass the cost on, or most of it, to the public in higher prices. And you've got Trump saying, oh, all these countries are giving us all this money now with the tariffs. No, they're not giving you a penny, and you know that, you liar. The money you say you're accumulating is coming from the people you said you represented in higher prices. This is why inflation's starting to really wind up in the United States. So the thing is, whenever any of these people in authority tell you something, the thing to do is to go on the premise that they're lying to you. Now, you do a bit of research, and every now and again, and it is only now and again, you'll find that they were telling the truth, or at least partly the truth in this case. But overwhelmingly, you will find they were indeed lying, because that's their job. Because this is a perceptual conspiracy to control perception, to control behavior. And lying is the bottom line foundation essential to that. And therefore, instead of saying they're the authority and they're the government and they wouldn't lie to us, or accept that what they're saying is true, you take as a matter of course the fact that if they say it's happening, it's not. And if they say they'll do it, they won't. And if they say they won't do it, they will. And they're lying to you. And that, I can tell you, saves a lot of grief further down the road when you realize they were indeed lying to you because of the events that unfold. And the thing is that we look at countries, look at Belgium and the Netherlands and Britain and America and Canada and so on. But each of them has a deep state. In other words, a network that runs the country from the shadows. But you go to the next level, and all those deep states answer to the same force. It's a global agenda. And that's why people that say, we've just got to focus on America. And people will say to me, why are you always talking about America? Because you're in Britain. Why don't you look after your own country? Simple. Because America is Britain, is Belgium, is the Netherlands, is Germany, once you get to that level above that.
David Icke, an icon. I'm so thankful that I can finally talk to you. If anybody want to know more about the agenda, problem, reaction, solution, and what they have in store and what to do about it, I would advise any listener and viewer to check out his books. You can also go to iconic.com. That's a streaming platform where you can see interesting documentaries, videos to support the man because he's independent and he keeps on speaking. He's one of the few that I know that still, despite consequences, says what he thinks is true. I want to thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. And if you support my podcast, you can go to hetehangers.com/steun. You can do a monthly donation or one-time donation, or go to hetehangers.com/shop and buy some of my merchandise and spread this video, spread my message, spread David Icke's message, and give it a comment, share, so we can reach more people with this important message. I want to thank David for being a guest, and I will talk to you guys in the next episode. Thanks, everyone.
Well, once again, David Icke has proven why he is one of the most sought after researcher in these times. His works, his revelation, his exposure, it's so relevant now, people. And this man has been doing this 30 odd years, saying most of what he's saying now, he's been saying for 30 odd years. Probably other words, other characters, other situations, but when you're awakening or you reach a high level of awakening, what David is saying, it seems so straightforward. 1, 2, 3. Like you're saying, why can't people just get this? It's so easy. But you have to remember, when you're not awakened or on that journey of awakening, these things seem so far-fetched, so crazy. But see it, people, it's all playing in front of our eyes. All playing. And this AI, we see the AI take over. We see the kids them, we see the youths them. Phone. Them already connected to AI as well, Mr. People. That is my revelation. Most of humanity is already connected to AI. It gets so bad when people gather, no one talking with each other, no one looking in each other's eye. It's just the phone eye, the phone camera, the eye of all eyes. Not the eye and eye connection like back then. Not the eye and eye connection, but the phone eye you're looking in, which is the camera. But whoa, we are foreign, people. We are foreign, and it's coming at a rapid pace. 2030 is around the corner. It's 2026 already. And remember, they have the big plan for 2030, people. So you can only imagine. You can only imagine what's to come. So people, we need David Icke. We need David Icke more than ever. More than ever. This man, whoa, people. Whoa. And we have to understand why his band can't travel, because this man, people, is a danger to the infrastructure. Danger. And I love it. I love it, people. Danger. Danger to them stupidness and them bull crap. So fight on, David. We're there to fight with you, protect you, walk with you. You know? Yeah.